Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because their focus is divided. From the very beginning, let me say this clearly: where your focus goes, your future flows. If you're distracted, your results will be diluted. If you're focused, your progress becomes inevitable. The world doesn't reward busy people, it rewards intentional people. And today, if you can master one skill that separates winners from wanderers, it is the ability to focus longer than everyone else. Focus is not about doing more things. Focus is about doing fewer things at a higher level. Average people try everything. Exceptional people commit to one thing and refuse to quit. When you focus, you're telling your mind what matters and what doesn't. And the moment you decide what doesn't matter, you stop leaking energy. Success begins when distractions end. That's why unfocused effort feels exhausting, but focused effort feels powerful. Clarity is not something you wait for. Clarity is something you create through focus. Most people believe power comes from talent, connections, or opportunity. But real power begins the moment your mind stops wandering and starts lying, and your focus sharpens, confusion fades. When confusion fades, hesitation disappears. And when hesitation disappears, action becomes natural. That is why focused people move faster with less stress and achieve more with fewer resources. They are not rushing, they are precise. Here is a truth that separates high performers from everyone else: uncertainty drains energy, but clarity multiplies it. When you don't know exactly what you want, every option feels heavy, every decision feels risky. But when your focus is locked in, decisions become simple. You stop asking, "Is this good?" and start asking, "Does this move me closer?" That single shift changes everything. Clarity does not reduce your options, it removes distractions disguised as opportunities. Focus is the discipline of telling your future that it matters more than your feelings in the moment. Most people let emotions decide their actions, which is why their results are inconsistent. Focused individuals allow vision to lead emotions instead of the other way around. They understand that clarity is not emotional, it is intentional. And intention repeated daily creates authority over your own life. When your mind is clear, your posture changes, your voice changes, and your execution changes. Power is not loud, power is not frantic, power is calm certainty. When clarity is present, you no longer need to prove yourself. You move with quiet confidence because you know where you are going. That calmness unsettles distracted people because they mistake noise for progress. Focused people don't chase movement, they create momentum. Momentum is what happens when clarity meets consistent action over time. Most people struggle not because they lack discipline, but because they lack direction. Discipline without clarity feels like punishment. Discipline with clarity feels like purpose. When you know exactly why you are doing something, effort becomes meaningful. Focus gives meaning to effort. Without clarity, work feels endless. With clarity, work feels strategic. You are no longer busy, you are building. Focus also protects you from comparison. When your vision is clear, other people's success does not threaten you. It informs you. It inspires you. Distraction makes you compete. Clarity makes you concentrate. The moment you stop looking sideways, you start moving forward faster. That is why focused people grow rapidly while others stay stuck despite working harder. They are not doing more, they are doing what matters. Here's a powerful hook you need to understand: your life is always moving in the direction of your clearest thought. Whatever you think about the most, you move toward unconsciously. Focus trains your mind to aim. And a mind with aim becomes dangerous in the best way possible. When clarity is present, procrastination loses its grip because uncertainty is no longer feeding it. Procrastination thrives on confusion, not laziness. Clarity also simplifies complexity. When your focus is sharp, you can handle pressure without panic. Problems don't overwhelm you, they get processed. You stop reacting and start responding. Focus creates mental order, and mental order creates emotional stability. Emotional stability allows you to lead, build, and decide without being ruled by fear. Fear survives in fog, clarity exposes it. Most people don't need more motivation. They need a clearer target. Motivation comes and goes, but clarity anchors you when motivation fades. When you are focused, you don't need to feel ready. You act because readiness is no longer required. Action itself creates confidence, and confidence compounds when your actions are aligned with a clear vision. Clarity turns time into an ally instead of an enemy. When your focus is scattered, time feels like it's running out. When your focus is sharp, time starts working for you. Every day builds on the last instead of resetting. That is how progress accelerates. That is how ordinary effort becomes powerful. The moment your focus becomes intentional, your life stops feeling accidental. You stop drifting and start directing. You stop reacting and start choosing. Clarity does not guarantee ease, but it guarantees effectiveness. And effectiveness is where real power lies. Distractions don't announce themselves as enemies. They introduce themselves as small, harmless interruptions. That is why they are so dangerous. They don't destroy your progress in one dramatic moment. They slowly drain it day by day. Every distraction steals a piece of your attention, and attention is the currency of achievement. When your attention is divided, your results are delayed. When your attention is disciplined, your future accelerates. Here is a powerful truth most people underestimate. You are not tired. You are distracted. Mental fatigue often has nothing to do with workload and everything to do with constant switching. Every time you shift focus, your brain pays a cost. Momentum breaks, clarity weakens, energy leaks. Over time, this creates the illusion that success is exhausting when in reality, distraction is what's draining you. Distractions are especially dangerous because they feel productive. Checking messages, scrolling for inspiration, responding to everything immediately. These actions create motion without progress. They keep you busy but prevent you from building anything meaningful. The trap is not inactivity. The trap is activity without intention. And the more ambitious you are, the more distractions will try to pull you off your assignment. One of the most important skills you can develop is the ability to delay response. Not every notification deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your consideration. Not every opportunity deserves your time. Highly successful people do not react to life, they design it. They understand that boundaries are not restrictions, they are protections. What you allow into your mental space will eventually shape your outcomes. Here's a hook you need to hear clearly. Whatever distracts you also directs you. If you don't choose your focus, someone else will. Distractions quietly take control of your schedule, your emotions, and your priorities. And when that happens, you may feel like you're moving, but you're no longer moving where you intended to go. Direction is not determined by effort. It is determined by attention. Distractions also weaken discipline over time. Every time you give in to an interruption, you train your brain to expect escape. Focus becomes harder not because you lack willpower, but because you've practiced distraction. The mind becomes excellent at whatever it repeats. If you repeatedly interrupt your own focus, deep work begins to feel uncomfortable. And what feels uncomfortable often gets avoided, even when it's important. Another hidden cost of distraction is emotional instability. Constant interruptions keep your nervous system on alert. You feel busy, pressured, and restless without knowing why. Focus calms the mind because it creates order. Distraction creates chaos, and chaos is exhausting. That's why eliminating distractions doesn't just improve productivity, it improves peace. A focused mind is a grounded mind. Distractions also rob you of excellence. Mastery requires depth, and depth requires time without interruption. You cannot create exceptional results while living in shallow attention. Great ideas don't reveal themselves in fragments. They appear in stillness and sustained concentration. When distractions dominate your day, you reduce your work to survival instead of significance. Here's another hook. Discipline is not about forcing yourself to work harder. It's about removing what makes work harder. Most people try to fight distractions with motivation, but motivation is weak against environment. Change your environment, and focus becomes natural. Protecting your attention is not selfish, it's responsible. Your goals deserve your best, not your leftovers. When you eliminate distractions, time stretches, hours feel longer, progress feels faster. You stop feeling rushed because you're no longer reacting to everything around you. Instead of living in response mode, you live in creation mode. That shift changes how you experience effort. Work stops feeling heavy and starts feeling intentional. The most successful people in any field are ruthless with distractions, not because they are cold or antisocial, but because they respect their assignment. They understand that saying yes to everything is the fastest way to say no to their potential. Focus requires courage, the courage to disappoint others, delay gratification, and choose long-term impact over short-term comfort. Distractions don't just steal time, they steal identity. When you constantly break focus, you begin to see yourself as inconsistent. When you protect your attention, you begin to trust yourself again. That trust compounds into confidence, and confidence fuels execution. Eliminating distractions is not about doing less, it's about becoming more. Most people are waiting for motivation to arrive before they take action, not realizing that motivation is unreliable and temporary. It shows up when conditions are comfortable and disappears the moment resistance appears. That is why waiting to feel inspired keeps people stuck. Real progress is not built on emotion, it is built on repetition. What you repeatedly do, you eventually become. And when repetition is guided by focus, mastery is no longer a matter of talent, but a matter of time. Here is a critical shift you must make. Motivation may start movement, but only discipline sustains it. Discipline is not harsh, it is strategic. It is simply the decision to show up regardless of how you feel. Mastery grows quietly in these moments. It is built in the days no one applauds, in the hours when the results are invisible, and in the repetitions that seem ordinary. Yet it is those ordinary repetitions that produce extraordinary outcomes. Here's a powerful hook to remember. If you only act when you feel motivated, you give your future permission to be controlled by your mood. High performers do not negotiate with feelings, they operate from commitment. They understand that consistency is not exciting, but it is effective. Repetition trains the nervous system, sharpens skills, and builds confidence that emotion alone can never produce. Repetition removes resistance. The first time you do something, it feels heavy. The 10th time, it feels manageable. The 100th time, it feels natural. That is how mastery works. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates gradually. Focused repetition eliminates the mental friction that makes progress feel difficult. Over time, what once required effort becomes automatic, and what becomes automatic becomes powerful. Another truth most people overlook is that motivation fades faster when results are delayed. Repetition solves that problem. When your process is clear, You no longer rely on outcomes to keep going. You rely on systems. Systems create stability. Stability creates momentum, and momentum creates belief. Belief rooted in evidence is far stronger than belief rooted in emotion. Repetition also reshapes identity. When you consistently show up, you stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. That shift is subtle but transformative. You begin to trust yourself. And self-trust is one of the most valuable assets you can develop. Once you trust yourself, discipline becomes easier because you are no longer fighting your own patterns. Here's another hook. Mastery is not reserved for the gifted. It is claimed by the committed. Talent may give you a head start, but repetition determines the finish line. Focused repetition compounds quietly. Others may not notice your growth at first, but one day they will call it sudden success. You will know it was never sudden. It was stacked days of intentional practice. Repetition also simplifies decision making. When your actions are habitual, you remove unnecessary choices. Fewer decisions mean less mental fatigue. Less fatigue means more clarity. More clarity leads to better execution. This is why professionals rely on routines, not willpower. Willpower is inconsistent. Repetition creates reliability. Most people overestimate what motivation can do and underestimate what habits can build. Motivation is a spark, repetition is a fire. One can ignite interest, but the other sustains heat. Focused repetition ensures that progress continues even when enthusiasm fades, and enthusiasm will fade. That is not failure, that is reality. The question is not whether motivation will disappear, but whether your process will survive without it. Repetition also teaches patience. When you commit to doing the work daily, you stop rushing results. You understand that growth is layered. Skill builds on skill. Confidence builds on competence, and competence only comes through repetition. This patience creates emotional maturity. You stop quitting prematurely because you understand that progress is happening even when you can't see it yet. Here is a final hook to anchor this principle. The work you repeat becomes the life you live. If you repeat excuses, you master delay. If you repeat focus, you master execution. Repetition is always working either for you or against you. When guided by clarity and commitment, repetition transforms effort into excellence and struggle into strength. Your identity is not fixed, it is formed. And what forms it more than anything else is what you focus on consistently. The way you see yourself today is the result of repeated thoughts, repeated actions, and repeated attention. When your focus is scattered, your identity feels unstable. When your focus is disciplined, your identity strengthens. You don't become confident by saying affirmations. You become confident by focusing long enough to produce evidence. Here's a hook you need to hear clearly. You will never outperform the version of yourself you believe you are. Focus is the tool that upgrades that version. Every time you stay locked in, when it would be easier to quit, your self-image expands. You begin to see yourself as someone who can endure, someone who can execute, someone who can finish. Identity is built through proof, and proof is created through focused action. Most people struggle with consistency because their identity is still tied to outcomes instead of effort. When results don't show up quickly, doubt creeps in. But focused individuals anchor their identity to behavior, not results. They measure themselves by whether they showed up, not by immediate reward. Over time, this creates emotional stability. You stop riding highs and lows and start operating from certainty. Focus also silences the internal noise that questions your ability. Doubt feeds on distraction. The more your attention jumps, the louder insecurity becomes. But when your focus is deep, doubt doesn't get oxygen. You don't have time to question yourself because you're too busy building. Progress becomes your reassurance. Execution becomes your confidence. Another powerful hook. Confidence is not a personality trait. It's a byproduct of focus. When you give your attention to one direction long enough, your mind aligns with it. Your body follows. Your decisions simplify. You stop second guessing because repetition has already answered the questions for you. This is why focused people appear calm under pressure. They've already proven to themselves that they can handle it. As your identity grows, your standards change. You stop tolerating distractions that once controlled you. You stop making excuses that once felt reasonable, not because someone told you to, but because it no longer matches who you see yourself becoming. Focus creates internal alignment. And when alignment is present, discipline feels natural instead of forced. Focused effort also builds integrity with yourself. Every time you keep a promise you made in private, your self-respect increases. That self-respect becomes the foundation of leadership, influence, and authority. People trust those who trust themselves, and self-trust is built quietly in moments no one else sees through consistent focus. Here's another hook. The strongest version of you is hidden behind your longest attention span. Most people never meet that version because they leave too early. They change directions too fast. They abandon the process before it has time to shape them. Identity requires time under tension. Focus keeps you there long enough for transformation to occur. As your identity strengthens, comparison loses its power. When you know who you are and what you're building, other people's paths don't distract you. You no longer measure yourself against timelines that were never yours. Focus creates self-awareness, and self-awareness creates peace. You stop chasing validation because your progress validates you. Focused individuals also recover faster from setbacks. When your identity is rooted in effort, failure becomes feedback instead of a verdict. You don't see mistakes as proof of inadequacy. You see them as part of the process. That mindset is not accidental. It is trained through focus. The more you stay engaged, the more resilient you become. Identity growth also changes how others respond to you. You speak with more certainty. You move with more intention. You no longer need to convince because your presence carries weight. People feel when someone is anchored. That anchoring comes from knowing who you are because you focus long enough to find out. Here's a final hook to let sink in deeply. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You rise to the level of your identity. And your identity will never grow beyond what your focus can sustain. Every focused hour is shaping the person you are becoming. Every moment you resist distraction, you reinforce a stronger self-image. Focus doesn't just change what you do. It changes who you believe you are. Most people treat commitment as something flexible, something they revisit when conditions change. That mindset alone explains why their results remain inconsistent. Unstoppable outcomes are not created by flexible commitment. They are created by decisions that are no longer up for debate. The moment you make success non-negotiable, your behavior begins to align automatically. You stop asking if you should show up and start asking how well you will perform. That shift separates intention from execution. Here's a hook that cuts straight to the core. If quitting is still an option, focus will always be temporary. Non-negotiable commitment removes the escape routes your mind looks for when pressure appears. Most people don't fail because they can't do the work. They fail because they give themselves permission to stop. When that permission is removed, creativity increases, endurance strengthens, and consistency becomes natural. Non-negotiable commitment changes how you experience resistance. Instead of seeing obstacles as signs to slow down, you interpret them as part of the process. Resistance no longer means stop. It means adjust and continue. This mindset doesn't make you stubborn. It makes you strategic. You stop wasting energy on emotional debate and redirect it into problem solving. When commitment is locked in, progress becomes a question of method, not motivation. Another powerful hook to understand is this: commitment precedes confidence. Most people wait to feel confident before they commit, but confidence is the reward of commitment, not the requirement. The more consistently you show up, the more certainty you develop. That certainty compounds into belief. Belief rooted in action is unshakable because it's supported by evidence, not hope. Non-negotiable commitment also simplifies life. When your decision is final, you eliminate internal conflict. You no longer wrestle with yourself every day about whether to continue. Mental energy that was once spent on doubt becomes available for execution. This clarity is why disciplined people appear calm. They are not constantly renegotiating their direction. They decided once and moved forward. Here's another hook that reshapes perspective. Consistency is easier than starting over. Quitting feels like relief in the moment, but it creates long-term pressure. Commitment feels heavy at first, but it creates momentum that carries you forward. Non-negotiable commitment protects you from the emotional roller coaster of starting, stopping, and restarting. Momentum is fragile, and commitment is what preserves it. When commitment is firm, focus deepens naturally. You stop multitasking because distractions lose their appeal. You stop chasing shortcuts because mastery becomes the goal. This depth of focus is what produces unstoppable results. Not because the work becomes easy, but because your resolve becomes stronger than resistance. Focus thrives when commitment is clear. Non-negotiable commitment also reshapes how you handle time. You stop waiting for perfect conditions and start working with what you have. You understand that progress is built in imperfect environments. Waiting disappears because waiting was never part of the agreement. Commitment removes delay and replaces it with action. Another critical hook: unstoppable people don't rely on intensity, they rely on standards. Intensity fades, standards remain. When your standards are clear and non-negotiable, your actions follow automatically. You don't rise to challenges, you fall back on standards, and standards are built through commitment, not emotion. As commitment strengthens, your tolerance for excuses diminishes, not in others, but in yourself. You stop justifying missed days and unfinished work. Accountability becomes internal instead of external. You don't need pressure from outside because your decision is already made. That internal accountability is what creates long-term success. Non-negotiable commitment also attracts respect from yourself and from others. People sense when someone is locked in. Your words carry more weight because your actions support them. You no longer need to convince. Your consistency speaks. That consistency builds trust, and trust amplifies influence. Here is a final hook to let settle deeply. Unstoppable results are not the product of extraordinary effort. They are the product of ordinary effort repeated without negotiation. When commitment becomes final, focus becomes sharper, discipline becomes lighter, and progress becomes inevitable. So today, make a decision. Decide what matters most in this season of your life and lock in. Eliminate what doesn't serve that vision. Protect your attention like your future depends on it, because it does. Focus until your consistency becomes undeniable. Focus until your growth becomes visible. Focus until resistance turns into respect. And as I close, remember this: when you focus so hard that quitting is no longer an option, success becomes unavoidable. The world will call it luck. You'll know it was focus. Stay locked in. Stay disciplined. Stay committed. Because once you focus hard enough, you don't just move forward, you become unstoppable.